How you doing, everybody? Today we're taking a quick look at September 5. This was directed by Tim Fellbaum and stars Peter Sarsgaard and John Magaro, and chronicles the events of the 1972 Summer Olympics hostage crisis from the point of view of ABC sports reporters who covered the crisis as it went down. Much like the subject of my last vlog, this movie was originally given a limited release in December to qualify for the Oscars, which apparently paid off, and it has now been given a much wider release. And I know several people have commented on the timing of this movie coming out while we have the current mess going on in Gaza, and I, for one, would certainly like to think the people behind this movie were not cynical enough to try to capitalize on those events. If I'm wrong, and they are indeed like that, then they are welcome to stick their dicks in an electric pencil sharpener. But I really hope that's not the case. And really, the movie is not a story about the hostage crisis itself. The crisis is really just a backdrop for a story about journalism, and to a lesser extent, a story about police incompetence. Because if you weren't aware, the German police really screwed the pooch on this one. Now, to be fair, they were put in a situation that they weren't really trained for, but they still screwed that pooch and screwed it good. So, spoiler alert, I guess, for events that took place before most of you were even born. While the Summer Games were going on in Munich in 1972, the terrorist group Black September took several Israeli athletes and coaches hostage in the Olympic Village. The ABC sports team that was covering the games in Munich immediately sprung into action since the hostage situation was happening pretty much right across the street. And it is kind of cool to see the lengths they went to cover these events. They rigged up these ridiculously long extension cords so they could wheel their cameras out into the streets and capture the hostage crisis as it was going on, because video cameras were not really portable back then, but they made them as close to portable as they could. They disguised one of their reporters as an athlete so he could actually get into the village and deliver tapes and other supplies to Peter Jennings and his crew, who were covering the events from within the Olympic Village. And because Jennings could not leave the village, he had to communicate with ABC over the phone, and there's actually a scene where a guy is basically trying to hotwire a telephone into the audio console so Jennings could talk with anchor Jim McKay on the air. Of course, all of this stuff would be trivial to do nowadays, but it is kind of interesting to see how TV worked back then and the limitations they had to work with and how they worked around them. It's an amazing display of ingenuity, and it is also an amazing display of hubris. The people in charge of the ABC sports crew were insisting that they had to be the ones to cover these events. No one else can do it, only we can do it because it's happening right there, like right out the window. We can see it. The problem is they did not have unlimited access to the satellite, or the bird as they called it. They had, I think, an 8-hour window, and that window was about to run out just as Jim McKay was interviewing one of the few Israeli athletes that actually escaped. And I think CBS was about to take over after them, and they're like, hey, we'll air the interview, share the feed. And they're like, no, we're not sharing the feed, it's our feed, damn it. And what they ultimately did was they did share the feed with CBS, but they superimposed the ABC logo in the corner so everyone knows what network is really bringing in this interview. And the whole time I'm watching this, I'm just thinking, are you for real? There's a part of me that respects the hustle, but people could be dying right now. Is having your logo in the corner of the screen really the most important thing to be concerned about right now? Just fuck you. And indeed, the way ABC reported on the hostage crisis did lead to some trouble. The German police tried to infiltrate the village to rescue the hostages, and ABC had their cameras pointed at them the whole time. And while this is going on, someone in the studio was like, hey, could the terrorists be watching this right now? Like, are we showing them exactly what the cops are doing? And it turns out, yes, they were, because most of Germany obviously would not have had access to ABC, but the Olympic Village did. Whoopsie. And that is not the only thing ABC did wrong during this hostage crisis. There's a point where Black September negotiates a transport to the airport, and the German police ambush them when they get there, and initially, reports start coming in that all of the hostages have been freed. And I don't know if this is exactly how it went down, because, you know, you gotta tell a very lengthy story within about a 2-hour window. Some things are going to be sped up a bit, but the movie certainly makes it look like ABC deliberated for a good 30 seconds before they decided to announce this on air without waiting for proper confirmation. And if you know anything about the actual events, you know what happens next. ABC then, a few minutes later, had to put out a correction to their announcement and say, oh, did we say all the hostages were freed? Sorry, when we said all, we meant none. Yeah, they're all dead. Our bad. And what I got out of all of this is what ABC Sports did during this time was journalism at its best and at its worst. I respect the quick thinking and determination and ingenuity, but they also did a lot of things wrong that in some ways made the hostage situation worse. On the technical side, I think they did a very good job with the look of this movie. It makes very extensive use of archival footage, and even the stuff that they shot for the film looks like something out of the 70s, and it blends in with the archival footage very well. There wasn't really a moment where I thought any of it looked jarring or out of place. It was very well done, with one minor exception. They use a lot of ABC's archive footage of Peter Jennings, but they also have Benjamin Walker playing Peter Jennings in the movie. And boy, his voice does not sound the same. Don't get me wrong, Walker is a fine actor. Really, all the cast in this movie were great, but he tried to sound like Peter Jennings, and I don't think he quite got there. And while I understand this is not a documentary and the events depicted in the movie are not going to match the actual events exactly, there is one scene in particular that really felt like bullshit to me. There's a German actress, Leonie Benisch, who plays a character named Marianne Gebhardt, and there's a scene where she's in a room with two American dudes, and they're trying to use a radio to tune into the police frequency to get some more information about what's going on, and all of a sudden, one of the guys says, hey, could you get us some coffee? Because, you know, woman, that's all women are good for, right? And she reluctantly goes to get the coffee, and after she leaves the room, they find the police frequency, but they can't understand what they're saying because they're speaking in German, and the other guy is like, nice job, you just sent away the one person that could have translated this. And later there's a scene where that guy ends up bringing her a cup of coffee to make up for his stupidity earlier, and the whole time I'm thinking, putting the Aaron Sorkin brand of feminism aside, are we really meant to believe that in this entire goddamn studio, ABC has one German translator? Come on. And sure enough, this character is not an actual person. It's a composite of several different people, which is a thing that sometimes has to be done in these kinds of movies, because again, you're trying to tell a very lengthy story in a couple of hours. But surely there's a better way to do that. That scene just felt forced and it did not work. Overall, it's an interesting movie from a technological history perspective and showing both the good and bad sides of journalism. And it shows an important historical event from a unique perspective and made very good use of the archival footage. But while I would say it is a good movie, I don't think there's anything about it that makes it absolutely necessary to see it on the big screen. I do think it's worth a watch, but I think you're fine to wait for VOD. And that's all I have to say about September 5. Till next time, take care.